Hello YouTube, sorry I haven't done a video in a while. I have some things in the works for the channel, but I wanted to jump back on for a rare one-off video on a subject that is one of my favorites, but also one I find so infuriating, and that is Bobby Bonilla Day. As you probably know if you're watching this video, we called today Bobby Bonilla Day because today, like every July 1st until 2035, the New York Mets will write a check to Bobby Bonilla for a comically specific amount of money, $1,193,248.20. This is despite the fact that Bonilla has not played a professional baseball game since 2001 and has not played for the Mets since 1999. It's such a goofy fact, and so many fans have latched onto it that when Steve Cohen first bought the Mets back in 2020, he floated the idea of having a ceremony for the occasion where Bonilla would accept the check in person at Citi Field. But the fact that a capitalist creep like Cohen can joke about Bobby Bonilla Day should tell you something is up, and it gets at my issue with the whole thing. You see, Bobby Bonilla Day is really part of a pro-capitalist anti-labor propaganda. The subtext of every joke and tweet and TV segment and t-shirt about Bobby Bonilla Day is LOL Mets, or look at this stupid team forced to pay a player like Bonilla more than 3 decades after he last suited up. It makes Bonilla look like he is laughing all the way to the bank while the hapless Mets turn out their pockets.
Happy Bobby Bonilla Day. That is the scoop. So instead of paying Bonilla, I want to make sure everyone understands when we say Happy Bobby Bonilla Day, this is what we mean. In 2000, the Mets could have given Bobby Bonilla $5.9 million and been done with it. Instead, they agreed to make annual payments of $1.2 million for 25 years, starting on July 1st of 2011, including a negotiated 8% interest increase.
And thus, Bobby Bonilla Day was born, a holiday in which baseball fans mock the Mets, and Bobby Bo buys himself something nice.
But this is bullshit. The Bobby Bonilla deal was a good deal for the Mets, not a bad one. See, what happened was that Bobby Bonilla was owed $5.9 million in salary after the 1999 season, and the Mets didn't want to pay it, so they asked him to defer the money, and he agreed. Right there, you should see that it was the Mets who initiated the deal. They wanted to do this. Because rather than having to pay Bonilla $5.9 million, they were able to defer their payments over 35 years. In fact, they didn't make a single payment on the deal from 2000 to 2010. So in effect, Bonilla was lending the Mets almost $6 million and not collecting anything on that loan for over 10 years. If someone offered you $6 million on those terms, you would be crazy to say no. The reason it looks like a bad deal at first glance is that the total amount the Mets will end up paying Bonilla, which is actually $29,831,205, that's a lot more than the $5.9 million they initially owed him. But that's the funny thing about compound interest. If you let interest accrue for 35 years, it starts to add up. And the interest rate Bonilla charged the Mets, 8%, is not actually unreasonable. It's often suggested that the reason the Mets agreed to the Bonilla deal is that at the time, the Wilpons, who owned the Mets, were clients of Bernie Madoff, who was fabricating unreasonably high returns for his investors.
Obviously, Bonilla agreed to this deal because he's gonna get a lot more money in the long run, but why'd the Mets agree to it? Well, they might have wanted to free up money right away to build on the momentum of the '99 season, but perhaps a bigger impetus. They had an investment scheme that was earning them more than 8% interest a year. All they had to do was continue to put blind trust in a finance whiz named Bernie Madoff. Whoops.
So the idea is that the Mets were duped into thinking they could beat that 8% return. But even this is another way of making the Mets seem like innocent simpletons. You don't actually need some investing genius to beat a return of 8% per year. The average annual rate of return on the S&P 500 is between 8 and 10%. The Mets could have put the salary they saved on Bobby Bonilla into an index fund and still come out ahead on the deal. And all this misses the larger point, because the Mets are not a pension fund. They don't exist purely to generate a reliable return on their investment. The Mets are a baseball team, and the goal of a baseball team is to win games and win championships. Getting rid of Bonilla helped them do that. By getting Bonilla to defer his salary, the Mets freed up $5.9 million for the 2000 season. That was almost exactly what they needed to take on in the salary of Mike Hampton, who they traded for that same offseason and earned $5.75 million in salary that year. Hampton became the Mets' best pitcher, finished second on the team in wins above replacement, and won the NLCS MVP en route to the Mets' first World Series appearance since 1986.
Hampton with a count of 3-1. For the first time since 1986, the Mets are going to the World Series.
On top of all that, when Hampton signed as a free agent with the Colorado Rockies a year later, the Mets used their compensatory draft pick to select David fucking Wright, the franchise's all-time leader in wins above replacement for position players. In other words, by making the deal with Bobby Bonilla, the Mets were able to make a World Series and draft a franchise player. And all they had to do to get that was pay an interest rate slightly lower than you would have gotten on a 30-year fixed mortgage at the time. So what the hell is the problem? The only reason anyone makes a big deal about Bobby Bonilla Day, aside from confusion about compound interest, is that some people, especially owners like the Wilpons and executives like Steve Phillips who agreed to the deal, like to make it seem as if players are pulling a fast one on the owners every time they get a check. Every year these people shake their heads and laugh and go, LOL Mets, and can you believe they fell for that? Or even, good for Bobby Bonilla taking advantage of their stupidity. But in every case, the suggestion is always that it's Bonilla who came out ahead, and that the only reason a player might make a lot of money is that some hapless team made a stupid mistake. Of course, Bonilla made out well. He's effectively getting a pension of $1.2 million per year into his mid-70s, which is a pretty enviable retirement. But the idea that a well-compensated worker is ever compatible with good business sense is a dangerous one for capitalists to let out. So instead, they try to make a holiday over how dumb the Mets are and insist that anytime a player gets a check in retirement, he must be running some kind of scam on the owners. But as fans, we should push back on that. Every team should be so lucky as to have a Bobby Bonilla Day.